everyone, I hope you're all doing well. In today's video, we're going to talk about an empress, and no, not the Empress of Ireland or the Empress of Britain. I'm talking about the RMS Empress of Japan, later renamed the Empress of Scotland, and perhaps best remembered as the TS Hanseatic. This vessel has an incredible story to tell. So, hello everybody, it's Jamie from Old Shipping Lines, and in today's video we'll cover the full history of the Empress of Scotland from her beginnings as the Empress of Japan, right through to her final days as the TS Hanseatic at the scrapyard. This video was requested by my friend and longtime supporter of the channel, Mr. Nick Ashton, who has a family connection to this ship, and I'm incredibly excited to share this story with you all. So if you're as hyped as I am, don't forget to leave a like so this amazing tale can be spread to as many people as possible. Let's set the stage. The first owner of the ship would be the renowned Canadian Pacific Line. By the 1920s, the Canadian Pacific conglomerate had created a seamless sea and rail network connecting Europe with the Far East. Passengers would sail from Great Britain to Canada aboard the company's steamships, then travel across the North American continent via Canadian Pacific Rail to Vancouver. From there, another Canadian Pacific ship would carry them across the Pacific to Asia. At the time, this was the fastest route from Europe to the Far East. In the late 1920s, Canadian Pacific embarked on a program to modernize both its Pacific and Atlantic fleets, aiming to shorten the journey between Europe and Asia by 2 days. The construction of the ship was entrusted to the Fairfield Shipbuilding and Engineering Company in Govan, just outside Glasgow, Scotland. Now, let's take a quick look at her specifications. Her gross registered tonnage would be 26,300, with her length 205 meters, which is 673 feet. Her beam would be 25.5 meters, which is again 84 feet. She could carry a total of 1,173 passengers, 268 in first class, 131 in interchangeable cabins, 164 in second class, 100 in third class, and 510 in steerage. And like many great ocean liners of her time, the Empress featured truly remarkable interiors. Let's explore some of these stunning spaces. The first class cocktail bar was a smaller, refined bar set apart from the grand lounges. Paneled in pale wood with brass fittings, a polished counter with stools, and small clusters of armchairs, it offered a quieter, more intimate atmosphere. Here, first-class passengers gathered in evening dress to enjoy martinis, sidecars, and other popular cocktails of the era, served with all the formality and elegance of a Canadian Pacific liner. The first-class main lounge was the heart of social life aboard the ship. A spacious and elegant room designed for comfort and conversation. Light-colored wood paneling, gold-accented moldings, and blue-gilded upholstery gave it a refined yet airy feel, while large windows flooded the room with natural light. Comfortable armchairs and small tables were arranged for conversation, and in the evenings, passengers in formal attire could enjoy music, reading, or quiet socializing. The lounge set the tone for the ship's first-class experience. Luxurious, elegant, and designed to impress without being ostentatious. The first-class restaurant was a grand formal dining space at the heart of the ship's first-class accommodations. Rich wood paneling, elegant light fixtures, and neatly set tables created an atmosphere of refined luxury. Passengers dined in evening attire, enjoying multi-course meals that reflected the finest culinary standards of the era, from delicate hors d'oeuvres to elaborate desserts. The restaurant was designed not just for eating, but as a social hub, where conversation flowed alongside fine wines and attentive, white-jacketed service. The first-class writing room and library offered passengers a quiet retreat from the bustle of the ship. Paneled in warm wood, lined with shelves of books, and furnished with polished desks and comfortable chairs, it was a space for reading, letter writing, quiet reflection. Gentle lighting and a calm, orderly atmosphere made it ideal for passengers wishing to correspond with friends or simply enjoy a book in privacy. Like much of the ship's first-class accommodations, it combined elegance with understated comfort. The first-class card room was a cozy, elegant space designed for games and quiet socializing. Wood-paneled walls, small tables, and comfortable chairs created an intimate setting where passengers could play bridge, whist, or other popular card games of the era. The room offered a peaceful retreat, combining the formality of first-class decor with the relaxed atmosphere of friendly competition. The vessel could go a speed of 22 knots. She was launched on the 17th of December 1929. Receiving the name Empress of Japan. Canadian Pacific had originally planned a sister ship for her to serve the Pacific route, but the onset of the Great Depression forced the company to abandon those plans. Instead, they focused their efforts on the Empress of Britain, a larger version of the Empress of Japan, which was under construction for the transatlantic service. The Empress of Japan was completed in June 1930 and ran her trials in the Firth of Clyde, reaching a top speed of 23 knots over the Skelmorlie measured mile. On the 8th of June, she was officially delivered to Canadian Pacific, a truly magnificent ship, beautifully proportioned, graceful, yet radiating an unmistakable sense of power. On the 14th of June 1930, the Empress of Japan departed Liverpool on her maiden voyage to Quebec before returning to Southampton. On her homeward passage, she averaged 21 knots, powered by 26,100 shp, while consuming 168 tons of fuel per day. On 12th July, she set sail from Southampton for Hong Kong via the Suez Canal, and from there began her trans-Pacific service to Vancouver, calling at Shanghai, Kobe, and Yokohama along the way. She continued to sail the Vancouver, Yokohama, Kobe, Shanghai, Hong Kong route throughout the 1930s. On the 26th of November 1939, the Empress of Japan was requisitioned as a troop ship. At the outbreak of war, she was in Shanghai. After voyages to Honolulu and Vancouver, she sailed to Esquimalt for modifications to prepare her for trooping. Her hull and superstructure were painted grey, and she then departed for Sydney, arriving on the 22nd of December. Soon after, she carried a contingent of Australian troops to Suez. On her return to Melbourne, she made another voyage to Suez, this time sailing in the company of the Queen Mary, the Aquitania, the Mauretania, the Empress of Britain, and Empress of Canada. In 1941, the Empress of Japan completed a series of trooping voyages from Glasgow to the Cape and Singapore, returning to the UK via the Panama Canal, a journey of 35,000 miles in just 141 days. After Japan entered the Second World War, the Empress of Japan was renamed Empress of Scotland, 10 months following the attack on Pearl Harbor. Although ship name changes were normally prohibited, Winston Churchill dismissed the restriction in this case, calling it nonsense. On the 16th of October 1942, she officially took the name of Empress of Scotland, becoming the second vessel in the Canadian Pacific Fleet to bear the name, the first being the former Kaiserin Auguste Victoria, renamed in 1921. In 1942, under heavy air attack, the Empress of Scotland evacuated 1,700 women and children from Singapore to Colombo. During 1943 and 1944, she served on trooping routes from Halifax, New York, and Newport News to Liverpool and Casablanca, transporting a total of 30,000 American troops. On the 9th of November 1944, the Empress of Scotland came under air attack off Northern Ireland. 3 bombs fell so close that they glanced off the ship's rails and a lifeboat before exploding in the sea. Captain J.W. Thomas ordered evasive maneuvers. The quartermaster steered the ship while lying on his stomach to avoid machine gun fire sweeping the bridge. Both men were later decorated for their extraordinary bravery. After the end of hostilities, the Empress of Scotland continued trooping duties, repatriating troops and their families until she was finally released at Liverpool on the 3rd of May 1948. Between 1939 and 1948, she had circled the globe 3 times, twice westbound and once eastbound, sailed 5 times to South Africa and Singapore, and visited Australia and New Zealand on 5 occasions. She also called at Canadian and US ports 12 times, made 8 voyages to India, and after the war, twice to Japan. In total, the Empress of Scotland steamed 713,000 miles in war service, transporting 292,000 troops along with other passengers. When released, the Empress of Scotland was the only remaining empress in the Canadian Pacific Fleet. The Empress of Russia had been burned out at Barrow-in-Furness in 1945 during refitting. The Empress of Asia was sunk off Singapore in 1942 by Japanese aircraft. The Empress of Canada was torpedoed and sunk in the South Atlantic while returning from Durban. And the Empress of Britain, completed in 1931, was set on fire by an air attack in October 1940 and later torpedoed while under tow. The Empress of Australia continued as a troop ship until she was sold for scrap in 1952 and was never returned to Canadian Pacific service. The Empress of Scotland returned to her builders at Fairfield Yard in Govan for a major refit, preparing her for the Liverpool-Quebec mail service and winter cruising. After 8 years as a troop ship, the extensive overhaul lasted from June 1948 until May 1950. Her passenger accommodations were completely redesigned. With no need for Asiatic steerage, the crew quarters were greatly improved. The ship was configured to carry 458 first-class passengers and 205 in tourist class. All deck coverings were replaced, and the promenade deck was enclosed with glass along her entire length, making it more suitable for the often harsh conditions of the North Atlantic. Externally, the Empress of Scotland received a fresh coat of paint, featuring a white hull and yellow funnels. The blue riband that had adorned her in the 1930s was replaced with green, while the company's red and white checkered house flag was added to all 3 funnels. Her propulsion system remained unchanged but underwent a full overhaul, and new propellers were installed. During trials over the Iran Mile following the refit, she achieved an impressive speed of 22.5 knots. Empress of Scotland set sail from Liverpool on the 9th of May 1950, embarking on her first post-war commercial voyage to Quebec with a scheduled stop at Greenock. She would remain the only empress to call at Scotland until the arrival of the new liners in the mid-1950s. On her second eastbound crossing, she broke the record for the St. Lawrence-Clyde Passage, covering the distance from Father Point in the Gulf of St. Lawrence to the Clyde Pilot Station off Little Cumbrae in just 5 days and 42 minutes. In November 1951, Princess Elizabeth and the Duke of Edinburgh returned from their Canadian tour aboard the Empress of Scotland. The liner had departed Quebec at 4:13 p.m. on the 9th of November and reached Portugal Cove in Conception Bay, Newfoundland, at 7:30 a.m. on the 12th of November. A strong northeasterly gale made anchoring impossible, and Captain C.E. Duggan expertly maneuvered the Empress, constantly fighting to keep her from being driven onto the shore. The royal couple completed the final 1.5-mile journey to the Empress aboard the 140-ton ferry Maneko, a trip of 45 minutes in rough seas. 2 fishing trawlers accompanied the ferry, carrying photographers and officials who were thoroughly drenched by the storm. The Maneko reached the Empress at 1:10 p.m., and after the princess and duke boarded and their luggage was transferred, the ship sailed at 1:46 p.m. The princess and duke stayed in the main suite on A deck, partitioned off and constantly guarded by selected stewards to ensure privacy. In reality, little secrecy was needed, as other passengers had been discreetly informed during the 2-day passage from Quebec that the royals wished to enjoy themselves as ordinary travelers, and that is exactly what they did. For about 40 miles out of Conception Bay, the Empress was escorted by HMCS Ontario and the destroyer Micmac, with plans for a traditional naval manned ship. Farewell. The heavy seas, however, made this too dangerous. Later, HMS Zambezi and HMS Creole met the Empress off the Ulster coast to accompany her into the Mersey, but even they had to break formation due to rough weather in the narrow Irish Sea. The Empress of Scotland arrived alongside Prince's landing stage in Liverpool at 6 a.m. on the 17th of November 1951, where the royal couple disembarked. In April 1952, the Empress of Scotland had her masts shortened by 44 feet to allow her to navigate the St. Lawrence River all the way to Montreal. This modification enabled her to pass beneath both the Quebec Bridge, located about 5 miles upstream from Quebec City, and the Jacques Cartier Bridge in Montreal. By this time, the channel to Montreal had been deepened, and the Empress of Scotland became the largest vessel ever to dock there. In April 1956, the new Empress of Britain entered service, followed a year later by the Empress of England. With the Empress of Scotland and Empress of France, the fleet once again featured 4 Empress liners on the North Atlantic route. The arrival of the new Empress of Canada soon after marked the beginning of the end for the older ships. The Empress of Scotland was the first to be sold, and the Empress of France was sent to the breakers in 1960. On the 8th of November 1957, the Empress of Scotland set out from Liverpool on her final voyage for Canadian Pacific. She returned to her home port on the 26th of November, arriving through a chill, wintry mist under the command of Captain S.W. Key. After disembarking her 213 passengers at Prince's Landing Stage, the great liner was laid up in Gladstone Dock. Just before the new year, the Empress of Scotland was sold to the Hamburg Atlantic Line. She departed Liverpool for Belfast on the 31st of December 1957, and following a dry docking and inspection, she was formally handed over to her new owners in Belfast on 17th January 1958. On 19th January 1958, the former Empress of Scotland left Belfast under the German flag, temporarily renamed Scotland. 2 days later, she reached the Howaldswerk shipyard in Hamburg, where she was renamed Hanseatic, and underwent a 6-month modernization and reconstruction, costing 43 million Deutschmarks. The Hamburg Atlantic Line marked Germany's final attempt to revive transatlantic passenger service from Hamburg after Hapag had withdrawn from the market. By the mid-1950s, the growth of the post-war German merchant fleet had convinced many that the time was right for a Hamburg-owned liner to re-enter the traditional transatlantic trade. Hamburg Atlantic Line was established in 1957 with the decision to start operations using a second-hand ship. Soon after, the Empress of Scotland became available and was acquired to fulfill this plan. The Hanseatic was painted with a black hull and distinctive red funnels topped in black, each bearing a white logo in the red section. Her passenger spaces were completely rebuilt to accommodate 85 first class and 1,165 tourist class passengers. The original third funnel was removed and replaced by 2 shorter, more modern funnels, and her bow was slightly reshaped, with a subtle rake at the top, adding about 6 feet to her overall length. After 6 months of extensive reconstruction, the Hanseatic left Cuxhaven on 21st July 1958 for New York, calling at Le Havre, Southampton, and Cobh en route. In 1959, she completed 12 round transatlantic crossings and spent the winter months cruising. By 1965, rising competition from airlines reduced her New York crossings to 8 per year, and the ship increasingly focused on cruise service. On 7th September 1966, while the Hanseatic was docked in New York, a fire erupted in her generator room, triggered by oil leaking from a fractured pipeline. It took 200 firemen to bring the blaze under control, by which time the damage was extensive. The generators were destroyed. The engine room suffered severe heat and water damage, and smoke and flooding affected much of the passenger accommodation. Her passengers were transferred to the Queen Mary, whose departure was delayed by about 4 hours to complete the transfer. The Hanseatic was initially towed to Todd's shipyard in Brooklyn for assessment, but Hamburg Atlantic soon decided to have her returned to the Howaldswerke yard in Hamburg for possible repairs. On the 3rd of October 1966, the ship departed New York under tow, beginning a 17-day journey across the Atlantic with the aid of 2 tugs. Once in Hamburg, it was determined that the damage was too extensive to justify repairs. The ship was sold for scrap on the 2nd of December 1966 to Elkhart and Company for 15 million Deutschmarks. Thus came the melancholy end of the Empress of Scotland. And there you have it, the full remarkable journey of a ship that wore many names and served many purposes. From her glamorous beginnings as the Empress of Japan, through wartime heroics as the Empress of Scotland, to her final chapter as the TS Hanseatic, this vessel truly lived a life full of history, adventure, and resilience. It's incredible to think of the thousands of lives she carried, the oceans she crossed, and the stories she witnessed over more than 3 decades at sea. While her end came in the scrapyard, the legacy of this great liner lives on in her tales of elegance, courage, and transformation. A huge thank you to Mr. Nick Ashton for bringing this ship to my attention. I had an absolute blast making this video, and I'm truly grateful. For everyone else, if you'd like me to cover a particular liner, let me know in the comments below. Thank you all.
And that marks the end of a video, my friends. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Now, if you liked what you saw, please consider subscribing to the channel, as that would help out the channel a lot. Now, if you have any thoughts, comments or questions, please leave them in the comment section down below, as I absolutely love reading your comments. And please let me know in the comment section down below as well what ships you would like me to cover in the future. Now be as well sure to check out our social media pages. We are on Twitter, we are on Instagram, and we also recently have a website, oldshippinglines.com, where we have articles of the ships we cover and we have book reviews as well. I think you will enjoy the website very much. Now, with that out of the way, guys, I wish you all a good night or day, wherever you are. Stay safe, stay happy, and we will see each other on the next video. Goodbye, my friends.